Emily Larson didn't whisper. She didn't check twice. She didn't glance at the passenger manifest before making the call that would ignite a national scandal. No. She stood at the entrance to the first-class cabin of the Sky Pulse Airlines Airbus A350, her voice sharp, her tone final. "This ticket has been voided," she said, holding her tablet like a badge of power. "Not for first class." She stared straight at Jonathan Carter, a 65-year-old black man in a charcoal suit who had just stepped forward with quiet dignity and a digital boarding pass in hand. Jonathan's brows furrowed, his jaw tightening, not in anger, but in recognition. He'd been here before, as a Marine in the 1980s, as a black man in courtrooms, as a civil rights lawyer too many times to count. But this time wasn't just a mistake. This time was deliberate. Deliberate like the way Emily snapped her fingers, demanding he scan ID publicly in front of everyone, a tactic rooted in humiliation and profiling. Deliberate like the way she eyed his clean-shaven head, his age, his skin. And as if the humiliation hadn't landed hard enough, Victor Langston, a white tech CEO seated nearby in 2B, stood up, walked over, and with no hesitation, shoved Jonathan's laptop bag from seat 2A down into the aisle like it was trash. "My seat!" he barked. "Move!" Jonathan didn't raise his voice. He calmly bent down, retrieved his bag, and replied, "Sir, this is my assigned seat." He held up the glowing screen from his phone, showing 2A with his name clearly printed. Emily leaned over, glanced at it, then dismissed it with a scoff. "Errored," she said. "Glitches happen." The cabin's energy shifted. Conversations died out. People stared, not just because of the conflict, but because they sensed something larger was playing out, something far too familiar. In seat 1A, Malik Evans, 33, Jonathan's paralegal, quietly powered on his tablet. The moment Jonathan caught Malik's eye, he gave the subtlest of nods. "Draft it," Jonathan mouthed. Malik nodded back, already opening the Carter Justice Firm's legal filing system. Jonathan turned slightly, breathing in deep. He didn't want to make a scene, but they were already making one for him, and 7 minutes was all it would take to change the game, decades earlier. In 1995, Jonathan had stood in front of a Marine promotion board in Virginia, denied advancement because of a disciplinary review that never existed. He learned then what power looked like in the hands of the wrong people, and he never forgot it. By 2010, at the age of 50, he had built the Carter Justice Firm from the ground up, carving a national reputation for exposing bias, discrimination, and abuse of authority, especially in air travel, where too many quiet moments like this one went unchallenged. That history wasn't a burden to him now. It was armor, back in the present. Emily reached for the intercom, pressing a button with theatrical flair. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice echoing across the cabin, "we're currently delayed due to a booking issue involving this passenger." Gesturing toward Jonathan with a glance full of performance. The cabin shifted again. A few heads turned. A white woman in 3D frowned. A man in 1C, a black man in his 40s, leaned forward, watching with subtle concern. Victor Langston, emboldened, stepped back into 2B and announced, "I have elite status." "He doesn't. This seat's mine." He raised his phone to flash a fake seat confirmation, then leaned over toward Emily. "Can't you just bump him?" Emily smirked and whispered something back. Jonathan stood still, unmoved. "Emily," he said calmly, "verify my booking, or I'll file a formal complaint under federal aviation law within the hour." She laughed, not nervously, but arrogantly. "You're nobody," Malik whispered from behind his tablet. "Draft's 30% done," Jonathan murmured. "Prep the full complaint." Across the aisle in 1C, a woman shifted forward. Alicia Morgan, 38, Skypulse's internal ethics officer, posing as a regular passenger, leaned in and whispered discreetly, "I'm logging this. Jonathan." He gave a tight nod. "Good. Send it straight to the board." Alicia opened a secure app on her phone. 2 rows back. Zoe Parker, 27, an activist and civil rights influencer, was already recording discreetly. Her lens zoomed in on Emily and Victor. She posted a short clip on X with the caption, "Black civil rights lawyer denied first class by Skypulse. In 2025, unbelievable." The clip uploaded in seconds. Within minutes, notifications began flooding in. Malik's phone buzzed beside him. "She posted it. It's already climbing," he said quietly. Victor Langston sneered at the back of Jonathan's head and muttered, "He belongs in coach, not up here with us." Alicia turned in her seat and fired back with a calm but biting, "Sir, you're dead wrong." Zoe kept filming. Malik tapped his screen. "Complaints 85%. Jonathan's eyes never left Emily. "Victor," he said without raising his voice, "you'll regret this moment." Emily, still acting as if she were the final word on justice, smirked and walked toward the galley. But the shift was already happening. Jonathan tapped his smartwatch, triggering a silent signal to Malik. The firm's internal alert system sent a pre-drafted complaint directly to its legal response team. Malik opened the final submission window on his tablet. Hovering over send, meanwhile, Victor Langston, seeing his influence start to slip, scribbled something on a cocktail napkin, folded it, and slid it across Jonathan's tray table. It read, "Back to coach where you belong." Zoe captured the motion on her phone and posted a still image with a zoom on the words. Within 5 minutes, it was shared by 3 national reporters and began trending. Jonathan read the note, then slowly folded it in half, placed it back on Victor's tray, and said evenly, "You've just handed me the evidence I needed." For a moment, the cabin fell eerily quiet. Phones buzzed. Passengers looked down at their screens. The trending topic, #SkyPulseBias. Malik glanced at his tablet. "Drafts ready? Just say the word." Alicia checked her phone, eyes widening. "Jonathan, it's blowing up." Jonathan took one slow breath, looked ahead through the fuselage, and replied, "Then let them watch. If you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere you earned, if you've ever felt someone try to shrink your dignity while the world watched, this story is for you. And if you've had enough of watching power go unchecked in places meant to be fair, subscribe now, because in the next 6 minutes, Jonathan Carter will show what justice truly looks like." Robert Hayes arrived with the calm of a man used to ignoring fire alarms. The 50-year-old cabin service director strode down the aisle like nothing was wrong, until he saw Emily pointing to Jonathan as if he were an unruly passenger rather than a first-class guest. "This booking's a glitch," Emily said, arms crossed, her voice laced with smug satisfaction. "He's disrupting the boarding process." Robert barely glanced at Jonathan before nodding, affirming Emily's claim without investigation. Then came the cut that sealed their fate. Emily leaned close, almost hissing. "Your lawsuit ruined my cousin's career. Now I'm going to return the favor." Her eyes gleamed with personal spite. Jonathan stayed silent, but Malik shifted in his seat. His hand hovered near his tablet, fingers ready. Zoe Parker, a few rows behind, was already recording again. Just then, Victor Langston, ever emboldened by the lack of consequences, leaned over and muttered, "Move before I call security, boy." The word cut through the air like a blade. Zoe gasped softly. Malik looked up, stunned. Jonathan didn't flinch, but his stillness was the kind that comes before a storm. Zoe tapped her phone and posted the clip immediately, tagging national media outlets. Within seconds, comments poured in. "Did he just say that? This is happening in first class? Skypulse has a race problem. The hashtag SkyPulseRacist trended before the wheels even left the tarmac. Near the front, Nathan Wells, 35, flight operations officer and part of the internal crew stationed at LAX, quietly tapped into the airline's internal booking system from his connected tablet. He didn't need a password override. He had clearance, with just a few strokes. He manually changed Jonathan Carter's ticket status from confirmed premium 2A to standby unverified. One click. That's all it took to create plausible deniability. No hacking, no breach, just the cold misuse of access. Moments later, a soft beep chirped from Emily's handheld screen. She looked down, grinned, and tapped a glowing button labeled Seat Reassignment Protocol. With a flourish, she turned to Jonathan and said, "You've been reassigned under our elite guest policy. Please move to the back, sir." Then, as if to seal the insult with theater, she reached down and pressed a lock button under his armrest. The seat stiffened. The controls froze. The message was clear. "You are not welcome here." Around them, whispers rose. A white couple in 3F started recording. A Latino father in 2D shielded his daughter's eyes. Zoe's camera stayed trained on the trio of Emily, Robert, and Victor, capturing the full escalation. The screen in the galley flickered, briefly showing Zoe's first video, already picked up by NBC's social media desk. Jonathan stayed motionless. His voice, when it came, was as even as ever. "Emily, that protocol doesn't exist. I helped draft the FAA's consumer protection policies. I know every line." Emily smiled like a poker player who thought she held the winning hand. "You're no longer seated here." "Accept it," Victor snapped. "I paid more than he ever could. This seat belongs to someone who belongs." Malik, now fully alert, leaned forward and whispered, "The lawsuit is 95% ready. Just confirm." Alicia Morgan, seated nearby, spoke up without hesitation. "You're wrong, and you all know it, Jonathan. I've logged Emily's slur, Victor's comment, and Nathan's falsification." She looked at her phone and added, "SkyPulse's board will have it in 60 seconds. Robert turned toward her, his expression faltering. "Let's keep this professional," he said weakly. Alicia didn't blink. "Start by acting like it." Jonathan remained still, the cabin's dim lighting catching the calm tension in his face. "Your seat reassignment alert is fake," he said, voice steady. "The FAA doesn't recognize arbitrary overrides once boarding is confirmed." Emily rolled her eyes. "Keep talking." Victor Langston stood again and waved toward the front. "Remove him already." Passengers started murmuring, this time louder. Phones were raised. Videos rolled. Someone whispered, "That man's a lawyer. I think he's suing them." Zoe's post hit 2 million views. News anchors were already downloading the clip. Alicia leaned over to Jonathan. "Zoe's video just hit the national feeds. It's on NBC News website now." Jonathan didn't smile. He simply nodded. Let the country watch. In 1985, when Jonathan was just 25 and stationed at a Marine base in North Carolina, he had been denied a leadership track because a senior officer labeled him insubordinate for questioning a logistics error. That officer retired with honors. Jonathan left the military in 2000 with scars, but also with purpose. That injustice led him to law school, to fighting for people just like him. By 2015, he had won a landmark lawsuit against a regional airline that had forcibly downgraded 3 black passengers without cause. He thought moments like that would start to vanish. But now, 10 years later, they stood before him again. Only this time, he wasn't the same young man told to wait quietly. Emily disappeared into the galley. A few seconds later, Jonathan's laptop bag was removed from his seat. "Unclaimed property," Emily announced to the cabin, "will be held up front." She handed the bag off to a junior attendant. Jonathan watched it go without a word. Then he turned to Zoe and asked, "Did you get that?" She nodded, her camera still rolling. "Front and center." He turned back toward Malik. "Finish it." Malik tapped twice on his screen. The draft complaint auto-filled the subject line. FAA Civil Rights Complaint. Passenger Discrimination Incident. Sky Pulse Airlines. May 2025. Alicia leaned forward and whispered, "The board is watching the NBC feed. They're calling in now." Back in seat 2A. Jonathan straightened his jacket, cracked his knuckles gently, and turned to the watching crowd. "My name is Jonathan Carter. I'm a civil rights attorney and former Marine. I've represented over 2,000 plaintiffs in discrimination cases across aviation, banking, and housing. And today, on this plane, I was profiled, but I assure you, I will not be silenced. Not by a smirk, not by a fake alert, and not by a bribe." Victor looked like he wanted to speak again, but this time he said nothing. Robert shifted nervously. Zoe held up her phone, now showing Jonathan's video posted to her millions of followers. "You're trending across platforms," she said. Malik looked at Jonathan and asked softly, "Should I hit send?" Jonathan nodded once. "Do it." Malik pressed the button. And just like that, the draft was gone, filed to the FAA, copied to major media outlets, and time-stamped with the exact moment Emily lied about a seat that was never hers to take. The sound was sharp, intentional, and louder than it needed to be. Ceramic against linen, followed by the unmistakable splash of hot liquid hitting fabric. Emily stood over Jonathan's lap, her expression void of apology, a half-empty coffee cup still in hand. The steaming contents soaked his charcoal suit pants and splattered against his briefcase. "Oh," she said, flatly. "Accident." But it wasn't. The look in her eyes wasn't clumsy. It was calculated. Around them, passengers gasped. Someone whispered, "Did she just spill that on purpose?" Zoe, still filming, captured the entire moment, the way Emily paused after the spill, the faint smirk that pulled at the corner of her mouth. "You don't fit here," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Jonathan to hear. Robert, standing just behind her, barked, "You're not a first-class passenger, sir. Let's not make this harder than it already is." Jonathan reached for a napkin calmly, his movements measured. He didn't react. He didn't flinch. But his eyes locked onto Emily's. In that silence, Zoe's phone buzzed again. Her last video had passed 3 million views. At that same moment, Victor Langston stood once more, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a folded check. $12,000, he said, waving it casually at Robert. "If you can get this man out of here right now, it's yours." He didn't even whisper. He dropped the check on the aisle carpet like bait. Zoe zoomed in immediately. Alicia glanced down from 1C, muttering, "Did he just try to bribe staff in public?" Malik, now fully engaged, tapped open a secure folder and began recording the flight log manually. Jonathan looked down at the growing coffee stain on his pants, then at the check on the ground, and said softly, "I've seen cheaper prices for dignity, but this one's impressive." Robert bent, picked up the check slowly, holding it like it was radioactive. Then, after a long pause, he tucked it into his pocket. Zoe's eyebrows lifted in disbelief. She mouthed, "Did he just take that?" Jonathan saw her and nodded once. "Let's make it count." Meanwhile, inside the aircraft's internal system, Nathan Wells had flagged Jonathan as standby, review required, a status code typically reserved for last-minute bookings or fraudulent travel. It wasn't true. It wasn't even legal under FAA compliance. But Nathan had entered it anyway, hiding behind internal gray zones where accountability rarely reached. Emily returned from the galley. brushing past Zoe, and stopped short when she saw that Jonathan was still seated. His posture composed, his briefcase resting neatly beside him despite the stain. She turned to Victor and said coldly, "He's refusing to comply. If he doesn't leave, we'll escalate." Victor didn't hesitate. He stepped into the aisle again, holding a used napkin now damp from his drink, and tossed it directly onto Jonathan's lap. "Coach is that way. Hero!" The cabin erupted, not in laughter, but in outrage. A woman 2 rows back shouted, "This is disgusting!" A teenage boy nearby raised his phone. "Live streaming the incident," Zoe whispered. "It's viral. CNN's picked up the thread." Alicia leaned across the aisle and said clearly, "What you're doing violates every policy you swore to uphold. Emily." Jonathan looked up and finally addressed the room. "I came aboard this aircraft with a valid ticket. Assigned to seat 2A, I have complied with every instruction, every procedure. I've been threatened, lied about, and publicly assaulted. This ends now." With a calm precision honed by decades in courtrooms and military briefings, Jonathan reached into his coat, retrieved a secure USB drive, and handed it to Malik. "Finalize the lawsuit. All exhibits are on that drive." Malik inserted it into his tablet, fingers moving quickly as he reviewed the files. "Video logs, internal access records, booking confirmations, everything's here," he confirmed. Alicia was already typing into her own device. "Victor's bribe is now attached to an ethics board complaint. I'm submitting it in real time." Emily, sensing her control slipping, turned to Robert. "You have to act. He's refusing to cooperate." Robert's voice wavered. "Maybe we should." But he didn't finish. Zoe posted the full sequence to her X account under the title, "Black Veteran Attacked in First Class by Airline Crew and CEO Passenger. Watch the bribe fall." Within minutes, the post passed 4 million views and was retweeted by 3 major journalists. Cabin screens, quiet until now, lit up with a news crawl from NBC, SkyPulse Airlines under fire for alleged racial profiling during LAX boarding. A woman gasped. "That's us," she whispered. "We're on the news." In 1990, at age 30, Jonathan had applied for an elite Marine officer program, recommended by 2 generals, dismissed by 1 colonel with a record of racial incidents. The rejection fueled his resolve. That resolve built a firm, a legacy, a name known in federal courtrooms and city halls alike. By 2013, at 53, he had sued and won against 2 major airlines over seat downgrade profiling, setting new standards for accountability. And here, again, another seat, another insult. But this time, he wasn't climbing alone. Zoe's camera had become a sword. Alicia's internal access had become a shield. Malik's legal tools had become fire. Then, Alicia dropped the bomb. Holding up her tablet, she turned it toward Robert and Emily. "This is SkyPulse's internal misconduct log. I just accessed it using my credentials." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Emily Larson has 8 prior recorded incidents of racial bias, all buried, all marked resolved by Robert Hayes." She turned the screen. "See that? That's your login. Robert!" Gasps rippled through the cabin. Robert's hand moved to his pocket, the check still folded there. "That's not," he began, but Alicia cut him off. "You buried 8 incidents, and now a 9th is playing live on national television." Emily's face flushed. "This is outrageous." Jonathan stood, finally. "No. What's outrageous is that this airline allowed you to keep flying while good people were humiliated." Victor looked like he might speak again, but chose instead to sit. Zoe's feed hit 5 million. CNN's banner updated. Civil rights lawyer Jonathan Carter files suit mid-flight against SkyPulse. Robert looked around and realized the walls were closing in. He reached into his jacket and dropped the check onto the tray table in front of Emily. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. But you did. Jonathan raised his voice just enough to be heard by the entire cabin. I am suing SkyPulse Airlines under the protections of the Federal Aviation Act, Section 41-27, for unlawful discrimination, fraudulent reassignment, and harassment. Malik looked up. Filing in 3, 2. A soft chime echoed as the submission went through. Alicia whispered, It's live. The board's received it. Jonathan didn't smile. He just sat back down in seat 2A, soaked trousers and all, and said clearly, Now we wait for the reckoning. Emily's hands moved fast, not with panic, but with sharp control, as she stepped toward Jonathan's seat, snatched his phone straight from his tray table, and spun away before he could even react. Interfering with crew protocol, she said aloud, her voice dripping with false authority as she held the device aloft like a weapon. Passenger documentation is being seized for security reasons. A few passengers gasped audibly. That's illegal, someone muttered from 3B. Jonathan leaned forward, calm but direct. Return my phone now. Emily didn't. She turned toward the galley, her back to him, phone still in hand. Malik stood halfway out of his seat. You just committed theft. In public. Zoe was already filming again. They're spiraling, she whispered to no one in particular. The cabin's energy had turned electric, no longer quiet curiosity, but righteous tension. A storm was building, and every passenger could feel it in the air, just 2 rows away. Victor Langston made a show of shaking his head. You all are acting like this guy is some civil rights hero, he said loudly. He's just mad he got caught in a mix-up. Alicia turned around in her seat. Sir, we're well past mix-ups. Emily moved into the galley and shut the curtain behind her, trying to stall what was coming, but it was already too late. Zoe's newest video, Emily grabbing the phone, passengers reacting, had gone viral in under 2 minutes. CNN picked it up instantly, followed by Skift and the Root, the cabin TVs, flickering to life at the front of the aircraft, showed the breaking banner in red, SkyPulse incident goes global, civil rights lawyer removed from first-class seat. Just beneath it, a sub-headline read, Social media erupts after airline staff spills coffee, seizes phone. Passengers stared in stunned silence at the screens. The delay clock ticked past 6 minutes. No one moved. The crew huddled behind the galley curtain. Robert paced quietly. Nathan crouched near the emergency phone, speaking in hushed tones to ground control, his face tight. Meanwhile, in his seat, Jonathan reached into his carry-on and pulled out a backup tablet. With the screen still damp from the coffee, he powered it on and launched the secure case file database of the Carter Justice firm. Backup device active, he muttered. Malik leaned across the aisle, handing him a pre-loaded USB with complaint verification templates. Everything's there, Malik said. All we need is the timestamp. Jonathan nodded and connected the drive. The screen flashed to a live document. Carter v. SkyPulse Airlines, civil rights complaint, in the back of the cabin. Several passengers began murmuring. He's not bluffing, one man said. He's doing it right now. Just as Emily reappeared from the galley, Jonathan turned the tablet toward the aisle, displaying the lawsuit header in full view. Still think I'm making this up? He asked, his voice steady. Emily didn't respond, but her eyes widened. Robert stammered, stepping forward again. There's no need to escalate this. Jonathan didn't look at him. Escalation happened the second your team altered my booking. Zoe caught it all on camera. His voice, his posture, the tablet. CNN's newsroom clipped the moment within seconds. Alicia's phone buzzed. The board's watching the feed, she said under her breath. They're texting me in real time, Victor scoffed. What board? Alicia turned toward him. The SkyPulse Ethics Board, sir, and I'm on it. That shut him up. Malik's voice was quiet but urgent now. Verification system's blocked. I can't validate the final signature. Jonathan paused. Blocked by what? Malik tapped furiously. Someone's locking out your account in real time. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. Nathan. Across the cabin. Nathan looked up. His fingers hovered over his flight operations tablet. The look on his face was caught by a dozen phone cameras. Don't, Jonathan said. You're tampering with protected data. Nathan didn't answer, but the lockout cleared 5 seconds later. Malik nodded. We're back in. Zoe was still recording. They're watching all of this, she whispered, in the heat of that moment. Alicia leaned toward Robert and handed him her tablet. On the screen was a digital memo from SkyPulse Legal Compliance, Immediate Ethics Review Pending, Internal Incident Report, Emily Larson, Robert Hayes. Robert's mouth opened slightly. Where did you get this? Alicia didn't blink. I'm authorized. Jonathan stood again, wiping coffee from his jacket with a dry napkin. Emily, he said clearly, his voice filling the cabin. You have 10 seconds to return my phone, or I file a criminal report for theft in addition to civil charges. Emily folded her arms. You're nothing but a showman. Jonathan glanced at Malik. Send it. Malik's hand moved. A soft chime sounded as the complaint filed, time-stamped, validated, and backed by video, witness statements, and FAA citation logs. It was done, and it was live. Then came the twist. As Malik reviewed the digital receipt, his expression changed. We've got something, he said, eyes fixed on the screen. Nathan tried to alter your original boarding timestamp. That's why your verification glitched. Alicia leaned in. That's internal falsification. Jonathan nodded. Document it. Malik attached Nathan's actions to the case file, syncing with the FAA portal and SkyPulse's legal department. Meanwhile, Zoe posted a real-time update. Flight officer flagged for tampering with civil rights case. The post exploded inside the cabin. The lights dimmed momentarily as the intercom chimed. Emily reached for it, but Robert stopped her hand. Don't, he said quietly. It's already out of control. Cabin screens showed CNN again. The latest headline read, Lawsuit filed mid-flight. Jonathan Carter triggers national reform debate. Zoe turned her camera back to Jonathan. You've got the world's attention now, she said. He looked ahead, shoulders squared, and replied, Then let's use it. The aisle felt narrower than ever as Jonathan rose from his seat, coffee-soaked slacks still clinging to his legs, and stepped forward into the center of the first-class cabin. All eyes were on him. Passengers frozen mid-sentence, crew standing stiff behind the galley curtain, Zoe's camera fixed and streaming live. My name is Jonathan Carter, he said, his voice composed but commanding, each syllable measured like a judge's gavel. I am a licensed civil rights attorney and retired United States Marine. As of 5 minutes ago, I have filed a federal lawsuit against SkyPulse Airlines under Title 49 of the United States Code, Section 4127 for discrimination, obstruction, and passenger harassment. A hush fell over the cabin like a curtain drawn over chaos. Emily stood frozen near the galley. Robert shifted, his back straightening reflexively. Nathan stopped typing on his flight operations tablet. Victor Langston, still seated in 2B, sneered but said nothing this time. Malik rose next to Jonathan, holding up the confirmation screen from his tablet. It's done, he said, filed with FAA, the Department of Transportation, and mirrored to 3 civil rights media watchdogs. Zoe flipped her phone to display the trending tag, #SkyPulse lawsuit. Passenger phones buzzed as live alerts from CNN and Reuters flashed the same headline. Civil rights lawyer files suit on tarmac. SkyPulse staff named. Jonathan turned slightly to Emily. You're named directly, as is Robert Hayes and Nathan Wells, Victor Langston. Your actions are being reviewed as a material witness. Victor scoffed. You can't drag me into this, Alicia replied coolly from across the aisle. You offered a bribe on a recorded public flight. That's not just relevant. It's evidence. Robert opened his mouth to protest, but Alicia held up her Sky Pulse-issued ethics credential. Don't even try. Robert, I outrank you. Emily stepped forward, but her voice cracked as she spoke. You don't have any proof. Jonathan didn't even flinch. I have passenger video testimony, access logs showing tampering, audio of your slurs, and real-time news coverage documenting your misconduct. And more importantly, I have 8 prior complaints linked to your name, buried by your supervisor. His eyes slid to Robert. That would be you. Robert paled visibly. Zoe turned her camera toward him. 8? Someone whispered from the back of the cabin. Malik tapped his screen and opened a document marked Sky Pulse Misconduct Archive, Redacted Logs. He read aloud. February 2023. Complaint for tone and refusal to serve a black passenger in first class. Resolved. No action taken. May 2023. Unwarranted downgrade of Latino traveler. July. Hostile comment toward elderly Asian veteran, Alicia added. All of those closed by Robert under personnel discretion. The evidence laid bare in a public aircraft hit harder than any courtroom cross-examination. Robert stumbled back against the side panel. You don't know what pressures we're under, he started, but Jonathan cut him off. I do know. I've spent 4 decades confronting it. Victor Langston, sensing his moment slipping further, stood up with a check in his hand again. I'll give $3,000 to anyone who deletes their videos. You don't want to get sued for filming federal employees. A collective gasp followed. Zoe didn't stop recording. Say that again, she said, voice calm but laced with fury. Victor glanced at her phone, realized it was live, and froze. That's witness tampering, Malik said flatly, and intimidation. Alicia nodded. That's going in the complaint. Jonathan turned toward the cabin. Let the record show. This is what happens when bias is normalized, when power protects itself instead of the people. He looked again at Victor. You're not above this. You're deep in it. The overhead screens now showed Sky Pulse's internal news feed flashing, crisis status, escalated, cabin video under federal review. Somewhere on the ground, legal departments were scrambling, but none of that mattered here, because the reckoning was happening live. Seat by seat. Emily's voice rose again, shrill now. I was following protocol. That's what we're trained to do when a passenger becomes hostile. Jonathan raised a hand calmly. You call coffee in my lap, stealing my phone, and lying about my boarding status protocol? He turned toward the passengers. Let me ask you, has anything I've done seemed hostile? Heads shook, someone said aloud. You've been calm the whole time. A woman in 3A stood and spoke firmly. I've flown for 20 years. I've never seen someone mistreated like this, another voice added. This whole cabin's been watching. They crossed every line, Zoe whispered. The comment feed is blowing up. Alicia leaned in with her tablet. The Sky Pulse board just messaged, they're demanding all flight logs be preserved immediately, Malik added. And legal just requested the internal security footage. It's already synced to Zoe's live stream. Robert moved toward the galley like a man retreating from the front lines. But Jonathan's voice stopped him. We're not done. Malik turned his tablet to show a discovery pulled from a secondary backup folder. Final twist, he said quietly. There's more. Jonathan looked down and read. It was a digital memo, time-stamped 2 weeks ago, stating that Emily Larson had been previously warned about inappropriate conduct toward diverse passengers. The note, initialed by Robert Hayes, instructed that all future issues should be resolved internally without escalation. Zoe widened her eyes. They buried it. Alicia exhaled. They protected her, And they silenced passengers to do it. Jonathan nodded slowly. Well, now the silence is broken. The moment the lawsuit went live, the cabin's mood shifted from tense to volatile. Phones buzzed non-stop as Zoe's stream broke through 6 million views. Major news outlets ran real-time updates, and SkyPulse's official social media accounts froze, silent under the weight of public fury. Jonathan remained seated in 2A, his posture still, his tablet resting on his lap as the headlines scrolled across the cabin screens. Veteran civil rights lawyer sues SkyPulse mid-flight. Passengers confirm racial profiling. Video shows crew assault and cover-up attempt. Malik leaned closer, whispering, "They're scrambling down there. Our email server just got pinged by SkyPulse Legal, FAA, and CNN, all within 60 seconds. Zoe tilted her phone toward Jonathan. "Hashtags at the top of X. You've hit every trending feed in the country." Alicia glanced down at her own device. "The board is holding an emergency ethics review. This isn't just damage control anymore. This is exposure." Robert, Emily, and Nathan stood clumped near the galley, their whispers frantic. Emily paced with her arms crossed, face red and jaw tight. Nathan muttered under his breath, "We need to do something. Delete what we can." Robert shot him a look, but didn't say no. And then Nathan moved, subtle, but not fast enough. He tapped into a crew-only access panel beside the galley door, logged into the internal complaint portal, and began pulling up archived incident files, fingers flying. Zoe caught it. "He's deleting logs," she said, turning the phone silently toward Malik. Malik's expression hardened. "They're trying to erase everything." Jonathan stood slowly. "Then stop them." Malik tapped into the SkyPulse mobile back channel that Alicia had activated earlier and used his override credentials, granted to FAA-affiliated counsel during discrimination cases, to lock Nathan out of the system. "Done," he said. "No more tampering," Alicia added. 3 deleted records just auto-restored from the backup queue. They were all bias complaints from earlier this year. Zoe posted it instantly. SkyPulse crew caught deleting evidence mid-flight, stopped by legal team. The story wasn't just breaking now, it was detonating. Emily, panicking, lunged for the intercom and pressed the button. "This passenger has been aggressive and is staging this for social media attention," she declared, her voice shaking but clear. "We ask for your cooperation in de-escalating the situation." But instead of diffusing tension, her words set it ablaze. Passengers began shouting. "That's a lie!" one man yelled from 3C. "We've been watching this whole thing. He's done nothing wrong." Another passenger stood. "You spilled coffee on him. You screamed in his face." Zoe kept recording. "We've got 30 witnesses," she muttered. "She's lying straight through the PA." Jonathan remained calm. "Emily, your voice is now part of a legal record. Every word you say will be matched against testimony and video. So I'd suggest you stop talking unless you're ready to explain it in court." Emily's hand dropped from the intercom. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear. Nathan froze completely. Then came the final blow. Malik activated a live feed from the Carter Justice Firm's new pilot software, Flight Shield, a real-time aviation discrimination tracking platform. The tablet connected to an FAA cloud mirror and began displaying a transparent incident report tracker on screen. "This is Flight Shield," Jonathan said aloud. "It logs discrimination complaints, syncs passenger video, tags responsible crew, and sends live data to federal oversight boards." The screen showed Emily's name, Robert's login actions, Nathan's tampering code, and Victor Langston's passenger ID, all flagged and time-stamped. Alicia nodded. "This system is FAA compliant. They can't bury it anymore." Zoe posted a screenshot of the tablet feed. Flight Shield goes live. SkyPulse fully exposed. Within seconds, the platform's website crashed under traffic. Jonathan looked toward the front of the cabin, his voice quiet but firm. What you tried to hide is now public. This isn't revenge. This is responsibility, Malik added. And you've just rewritten how airline justice happens. The cabin was silent, but it wasn't the silence of confusion anymore. It was the silence that comes just before a system breaks. Across the aisle, passengers had put down their phones, many now watching Jonathan Carter not as a man in conflict, but as something bigger, something anchoring a long-overdue reckoning. The crew stood frozen near the galley, unable to retreat, unable to fix what they had unleashed. Alicia, still seated with her tablet in hand, turned to Jonathan and said, "The FAA just confirmed receipt, and CNN is calling this the most public mid-flight civil rights lawsuit in airline history." Zoe's feed climbed past 10 million, Malik whispered. "SkyPulse just went dark on social. Their legal team's in meltdown." Then the intercom crackled, not from the front, but from the secure channel synced through Jonathan's tablet. It was the CEO of SkyPulse Airlines, live on video, broadcasting into the cabin. His voice was controlled, but tense. "Mr. Carter, I'm told you filed suit against our airline. I've reviewed the preliminary complaint. On behalf of this company, I want to respond directly." He cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, the 3 employees involved, Emily Larson, Robert Hayes, and Nathan Wells, have been placed on emergency unpaid suspension pending FAA investigation. We do not tolerate discrimination in any form." A few passengers clapped. Zoe didn't stop filming. Jonathan stared directly into the screen. "Words are easy. What's hard is proof of reform." The CEO nodded. "Then here's our offer. We're implementing a permanent, binding anti-discrimination framework across SkyPulse called Skyforce. Every flight will include a third-party compliance auditor. Every incident will be logged publicly via your Flight Shield platform." Alicia sat forward. "Stunned," Malik whispered. "He's giving you everything." Jonathan didn't blink. "Every log must be permanent and uneditable. Every crew member must undergo quarterly bias training, evaluated externally." The CEO exhaled. "Agreed." A moment passed. "And, Mr. Carter, I'm sorry." For a second, the cabin was completely still. Then Zoe quietly said, "You did it." But it wasn't over. As the crew returned to their jump seats in stiff silence, a soft voice rose from the back. A junior flight attendant, young, trembling, and pale, stepped into the aisle. "Sir," she said quietly, looking at Jonathan, "may I speak?" He nodded once. Her voice cracked. "Robert. He told us not to report things. He said if we documented what Emily said to passengers, we'd get in trouble. He made us delete logs. I've done it more than once." The entire cabin turned to face her. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes wet. "I didn't know it would get this far. I just didn't want to lose my job." Zoe, stunned, whispered to her camera. "A whistleblower just spoke. On this flight." Alicia recorded her statement. Malik logged the confession into the legal brief. Robert didn't move. Emily looked away. Nathan sat slumped with his hands folded. Jonathan walked slowly to the junior attendant. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lauren," she whispered. "Lauren Ellis." He nodded. "Thank you. Lauren, you've done the right thing, and because of that, others won't have to go through this." Alicia tapped into the live feed from SkyPulse's compliance portal. "Robert's profile just deactivated," she said. "They fired him. Immediately." Zoe's screen lit up with breaking news alerts. Whistleblower confirms SkyPulse cover-up. Airline fires manager mid-flight. Jonathan looked out over the cabin, and for the first time since the ordeal began, he allowed himself a breath of quiet satisfaction. 2 months later. In the spring of 2025, Sky Pulse's image had changed, not from apology campaigns or hollow branding, but from a visible, trackable shift in policy. Every first-class seat had a sticker, Sky Force Protected. Flight Shield data was made public, each incident logged in real time, each resolution verified by a third-party review board. Emily and Nathan were barred from federal aviation employment. Victor Langston's tech firm lost 3 major government contracts after his bribe was exposed. But the legacy wasn't punishment. It was prevention. Because for the first time, complaints didn't vanish. And people like Jonathan didn't need to raise their voices to be heard. In his quiet Chicago office, the original lawsuit framed behind him, Jonathan Carter received a call from Sky Pulse's new board chair. "The policy you started now covers 11 airlines," she said. "We call it the Carter Clause." He smiled, then simply replied, "Let it fly." If you've ever been dismissed, silenced, or told you don't belong, this story is for you. Jonathan didn't shout. He stood firm, and that stand changed everything. If you believe in justice that starts with truth, share this story, subscribe, and let your voice be part of the change.